good evening, and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. We are very late. My apologies. We have an interesting show. We're going to jump straight into it. Just so everybody understands, it's not our fault we're late. Our good friend, Guyanese critic, had a little incident today, and he had the mic because he was doing some work, but he's all safe and healthy, and we're back on track now. We have a full hour, and we have a very interesting show. I was told we need to cut the long talks and get straight into probably the biggest bit of news to hit this country since APNU tried to rig, right? We have had two government officials hit with sanctions by the American Treasury Department. And what I'm going to do is, and a private citizen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the operator to just bring up the video, the most recent video of our ambassador to America speaking on the matter just today.
We reserve these types of sanctions for gross levels of corruption and human rights abuses. In fact, 2 days ago, we also levied sanctions on quite a few Russian financiers of the Ukraine crisis. So this is something that we reserve for very serious crimes. And after 2.5 years, it was a whole of U.S. government investigation. And we had, and it's a very high bar. We do not do this lightly. This is something that we ensure that we have a preponderance of evidence before we're ready to levy these sanctions. And we had that in this case against the 3 individuals who were sanctioned.
Are there other persons being looked at? Because I noted in the statement coming from the Treasury Department, we spoke of government officials who might have been involved. Could you comment on that? And also, Vice President Jagdeo yesterday said he has written to the U.S. government seeking more information.
That's absolutely correct, President Jagdeo. Actually, it was Finance Minister Singh and Commissioner General Stasia who requested specifically, officially, in writing for the documentation that we used in building the case for these sanctions, and that was requested, and I strongly recommended to our partners back at in Washington that they provide as much of that information as possible, because I understand that the government here wants to do their own investigation and follow up on this. They're also incredibly concerned about this corruption. And sorry, what was your first question?
Other persons being looked at.
Other persons?
As far as I know, that is not the case. The investigation was specific to these 3 individuals. I'm not aware of any additional investigations at this time.
But is this where it ends, or could there be criminal charges from your side also coming?
I think that is always possible. I'm not aware of it at this time, but that is a possibility.
Have you shared the evidence with the government as well? Have you shared whatever evidence you have gathered there with the government?
So that's what the Finance Minister and Commissioner General requested, and I passed that request immediately to the Treasury Department, which is sort of the umbrella for the investigation. And I again strongly recommended that they share as much of that evidence as that is unclassified, or that they can share, because we have a wonderful partnership with the government of.
Interesting conversation, as you all have had there. Tim and I were just chatting while the video was ongoing that what is currently, what obviously has been said there is the severity of these sanctions can be akin to what they have also laid against Russians that are facilitating the war in Ukraine. I mean, as she said in this video, it doesn't get more severe than this.
Yeah, it's quite serious. And she talked about the thoroughness of the investigation, the evidence that they have. And I don't think it could be more serious. It's put us on the map in a way that we haven't been on the map since Jonestown. It really is serious.
Yeah, but let's talk about a fact here. Let's talk about a fact. What this country has been plagued with for many, many years is every time the fingers are pointed at APNU or PPP, they will always have the same response. Well, show me the evidence of corruption. Prove to me that there is corruption. And what we have now is the American government openly stating that government officials in this country are corrupt and they are acting on it. And this investigation has been done with the entire Guyanese government and all related facilities in the dark. So what we've seen here is a completely independent investigation done. And we're going to have a little conversation now, because now that there is proof of corruption here, now I said that there has been two PPP executives that have been sanctioned in this, okay? So the first one being May Thomas. She is the sitting permanent secretary for the Ministry of Labor. She was, at the time of I think her initial contact with the American government when she was arrested in the States, she was the sitting permanent secretary for the Ministry of Home Affairs. May Thomas has been recently, up to PPP's last Congress last month, I believe, has been voted into their central executive, which is the highest level of the PPP. And now we've reached a point where she has gone on leave from the ministry, but has simultaneously resigned from the PPP party. The second executive is Mrs. Shell Mohammed, who is a current sitting councillor for the PPP, ran under the PPP in the local government elections, and is currently a sitting councillor for the PPP. So
this is the Echoes NDC.
Yes, correct. So now we have two PPP members that have been sanctioned for corruption and have been found guilty by the Americans for corruption. And what we found interesting about this, and then there was the private citizen, and I call Azruddin Mohammed a private citizen, all right, because he doesn't hold any public office. Now that we've reached the point of corruption reaching an international stage, action being taken by the American government, we've reached a connection point, which I think needs to be pointed out, between the sanctioned individuals and the PPP, because the private citizen, I mean, I can go back to the fact that when the president was sworn in, he was driving the Mohammed's vehicle. Contracts have been given to build fire stations. Again, family members that are part of the PPP. I mean, we've seen all the images, etc. What I'd like to bring up right now as well, which is another aspect of this, is a statement by the opposition, which pointed out another aspect through their network. I'm going to ask Robbie to please bring up the image. Here it is. I'll flip this around for you guys. We're going to bring up another image here that states the opposition today said U.S. sanctions against Permanent Secretary May Thomas and the People's Progressive Party local government representative Nazar Mohammed and his son directly linked the government to high-level corruption that possibly includes high-ranking individuals. Now, I'm going to state something here, Tim, that I think needs to be said, okay? What we all here in Guyana know is that the permanent secretaries and certain ranking individuals below a certain level within both governments, PPP and APNU, don't have decision-making power. Now, they have turned, the American government has turned and said, May Thomas is being sanctioned for corrupt actions. This, by the way, I'm tying into the fact that they have taken her phone away while she was arrested in the States a while ago.
I think they're more specific, weren't they? They said facilitating bribes and gifts to high-ranking government officials.
Facilitating bribes and gifts to high-ranking government officials.
I think that's the language that they used. Whether it's true or not, we will find out, but that's the language that was used.
So, please, Tim, on your perspective on this matter, chime in here. What do you think is occurring here, and where do you think this is going to be going from this point onward? Because have we opened a can of worms here? Is this done here, or is this going to go further?
I think we're on the brink of failed statehood. And I know that sounds extreme, but let me tell you where I'm going. If we were a proper, organized country, we would have institutions that enforce the law, and we would be managing our own problems. To me, it's inconceivable that a foreign country can come to Guyana to say, one of your citizens in your country is breaking your law by falsifying export declarations, and we aren't in a position to immediately say, we've checked and you're talking stupidness, or we've checked and we've already got it under control, we have initiated prosecution,
Right.
we're a sovereign country, mind your own business. We are a sovereign country. We are a nation, independent since the 60s, who have to respond to say, please give us your evidence so we can check it out.
Right.
That's so embarrassing nationally.
Yeah. Yeah.
That nothing more can even be said about it.
Yeah.
We can't even say to them, mind your own business. Now, something else bothers me. We talk about family and friends. You use that expression until it doesn't have meaning anymore. It becomes a cliche. And we talk about awarding contracts and awarding positions to your favorites. There are some advantages that have real money value in this country. A petroleum import license, very valuable thing in this country. It allows you to bring in fuel, sell it locally, and if you are one of the favored few who has benefited from a government reward of a petroleum import license, you're made. Similar benefits are given for mining permits and mining claims. Similar benefits are given for cambio licenses. Similar benefits are given for quarry licenses.
Right.
If you look to see who has an important one, similar benefits are given if you have a gold export license. I think they only got 6 of them in the whole country.
Right.
If the government smiles on you and gives you the kind of license that gives you exclusivity or almost a monopoly in an area of endeavor, so that you have no competition and you have access to the material that is sold, your money's made.
Right.
As soon as this news drops with the States, we heard that a cambio license had been revoked. We are aware of contracts that are awarded. We are aware of the gold export license.
Right.
We are aware of the close connection with the PPP. Is there anything else Guyanese need to look at to understand what we are talking about when we say that if favors are going to be given to family and friends, we are already destroyed as a nation. And we need a situation where both sides, both large parties, are in a decision-making forum that both of them can be involved in deciding who gets the petroleum export license, who gets the cambio license, who gets all of those things that give you profit.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm gonna bring up another conversation here, Tim, that I think needs to be said about this matter. We have watched a private citizen in Azzuddin Mohammed be told by a foreign nation that he has smuggled gold and he has not declared the rightful taxes on the gold that he has exported, right? He has not paid his rightful taxes. And they said the number was somewhere around $50 million, okay? Now, this is a foreign nation that has done their investigation and stated that Mr. Mohammed broke the laws of Guyana and they are punishing him.
Well, first of all, none of us knows if it's true or not. So we got to say
That's
that very
key.
carefully.
That's
the
key.
second thing is that the accusation made would not just resonate in Guyana. It would also involve flavors of money laundering and international crimes such as international gold smuggling. Because if they are correct and you're smuggling gold out, that is an international flavored crime. That's like narcotics.
Good.
So it wouldn't just be to say, oh, it's a municipal law. But what to me is embarrassing, and here's the thing. Let's look at mining. Don't let's look at this thing fancy. This thing got to be simple. Gold is taken out of mines in Guyana. Every single mine, and every miner will know what I'm talking about, has a logbook that's supposed to log the quantity of gold taken out day by day. That gold has to go to the gold board, to a dealer, or to a gold exporter. It has to.
Yeah.
That's what the law says. And then those people export it. hard, how difficult can it be if you got 100 dealers or exporters and one gold board to compare the records from these mines that the logbooks declare how much gold is coming out, to compare that with the amount being declared, to the amount given to the dealers, to the amount being exported, and say there's a gap, there's a discrepancy, or it's all going smoothly.
Correct.
Why is that difficult to do? And why is it that when the Americans say 10,000 kilos, 2 tons of gold, you and me can't lift the 2 tons of gold, have disappeared, that we can't immediately say through our systems, nah man, that's not true. We've checked it and the record shows it's all correct. We have to say, please give us your evidence. We are a disgrace. And what compounds that disgrace is that the government officials will then come and announce grandly that we are going to clamp down on gold smuggling. Oh my God.
Tim,
where are we going?
I come at this at 2 angles at you. First of all, I see your perspective, rightfully so, with your legal background, as not speculating, and you give them the benefit of the doubt to call it incompetence, that they cannot do their own internal investigation to see whether or not what the Americans are saying is true. You looking at it as incompetence, I can call it collusion. Okay? And this, I think, is what has to be said openly. There has to be, and this is not pointing at any one individual or what I can say is this is something that we have seen the numbers throughout previous governments. Now, in 2015, let's talk about this. In 2015 to 2020, the gold declarations were much, much higher than the gold declarations are now. Now, I want you to comment on that. What has changed from then to now?
Well, that's actually very interesting, because the fact is that the mining industry now finds this government to be much more friendly than the previous government was.
Good.
So if this government is more friendly and is more accommodating and is trying hard to encourage gold production, how is it that gold declarations are down? That's an impossibility.
Correct.
So all that's happened is that this friendliness, this friendly relationship, mingled with a lack of transparency, has created an environment for corruption. And what you're talking about, corruption thrives where the systems don't work. So you want your systems not to work, because then you can decide who you're giving the permit to, who you're giving the quarry license to, who you're giving the gold permit to. And those people give you your kickback, just like you're deciding who you're giving your contracts to and getting your kickback. And because the systems don't work, we know for sure that we do not have the ability to investigate. We do not have the ability to prosecute. We do not have the ability to convict. We know that. And if you don't believe me, we are still prosecuting Mr. Lowenfield 4 years after the fact.
Right. Absolutely.
So
the proof is right there.
It is well known that we have allowed our systems to fail, and the people in power on both sides in their day make use of that to enable the kickbacks and the corruption that perpetuates them and makes them rich. And that's what we're seeing.
I'm going to come at this at 2 other angles. Feel free to double back on this whenever you want, but I think I have to hit these points as quickly as I can because I don't want to run out of time. It's a large topic. Now, this is I'm going to focus for 2 seconds on Azruddin Mohammed as a private citizen, okay? Now, this is somebody that has a gold export license. As you know, those can't come by, right? Those are only given to select people.
I think there's 6 of them. Somewhere I read there's 6 of them.
I think it's about 6.
In the whole country, 6.
There's many gold buyers, but not exporters. And that's the difference that people need to understand. Now, there's only about 6 people that export gold legally out of this country, okay? Now, this is somebody that obviously, I mean, his father is a councillor, the PPP. The president was driving his vehicle up to not long ago. Barry Jagdeo himself admitted that they would have gotten campaign donations. They've been given contracts. Now, there is irrefutable evidence that these two, that the Mohammeds and the PPP are close, have a relationship. You can't argue it, okay? Now, this is somebody that the American government, as a private citizen, the American government has now said, I don't care who you know or where you know. I don't care what favors you got. I don't care who you're friends with over there. we are sanctioning you. And here is what I found most interesting, that the Guyanese government has watched a private citizen of this country get prosecuted, where America has been judge, jury, and executioner, has not seen one shred of evidence. But yet this man has been sanctioned, and the Guyanese government has come out and done nothing about it. As a matter of fact, they went on to revoke his cambio license. They went on to send May Thomas on leave, and to this point cannot prove that she's guilty or that he is guilty of anything. Now, I am not about to sit here and have a conversation about whether or not these people are guilty or the American evidence is real. But I'm sorry, you have now done nothing to defend your citizens. And I think that's something that has to be spoken about. The Guyanese government has thrown these people under the bus, has literally said, well, the Americans have said you guys have broken the laws. We are not going to dispute it. We are not going to defend you. And any businessman out there that is getting favors or is coasting along on feeling like they're above the law, well, you have now watched that a private businessman, much like yourself, who has been doing business, has now been found guilty by the Americans, and the government has done nothing about it. So everybody who's currently benefiting, everybody who's making a dollar, if the American government decides they don't like you no more, your government done with you. They throwing you under the bus too. Oh, we disassociated with that person. And I'm sorry, it's not right that a Guyanese citizen would have to be left for dead like that without a fair trial.
And yet, you know, Kian, as much as it pains me to say it, I take more comfort in that, in the checks and balances which inhere in the American system, than in letting us loose and at the mercy of our respective governments in this country that have demonstrated themselves, if not totally inept, then totally incompetent. And it hurts me to say that, but it's the truth. Look, we, in terms of our prosecutors and our police system, we are so compromised that there were 19 charges against Irfan Ali before he was president, instituted by the APNU government, the police under the APNU government, which mysteriously disappeared. There were charges against Nandalal, instituted under the APNU government, which mysteriously disappeared. After they left, there were then charges imposed against APNU folk, Bond and those folk, James Bond and them. Now, Lowenfield and the rest. Whether those charges are meritorious, whether they're not meritorious, is not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is it shows political influence, it shows control by the government of the day over the police, who should be totally independent, and over the prosecutors, over the DPP's office, which should be totally independent, and that is frightening. Yeah. And what it leads to is it leads to a decay in the machinery of justice, so that the prosecution becomes incompetent, the investigation of crime becomes incompetent. If a minister can pick up a phone and say to the policeman, let a man off, and suddenly the entire investigation goes to nothing, we have a serious problem. Agreed. In the States, Donald Trump has been charged and a trial has gone through against him. The president's son, Hunter Biden, was charged and convicted just the other day of a false declaration when he was buying a firearm. Biden said the law has to take its course. Correct. They have their checks and balances where the people at the top are subject to scrutiny. Yeah. There is nobody in the PPP subject to scrutiny when the PPP is in government. And there's nobody in APNU subject to scrutiny when APNU is in government. And therefore, for me, as much as it pains me to say it, I'm aware of the checks and balances. And every time we see a failure in our almost failed state, it is our own fault. And the last time we saw it was at elections, when we had to beg the Americans to come and help. We had to beg them to come, to count, to take away visas, just so that the right thing can be done. But then when it's not convenient anymore, we talk about we're a sovereign state and they mustn't interfere. Well, I don't want us to be thrown at the mercy of the people who are in charge and who are demonstrating that they are giving to family and friends. They are giving contracts. They are putting appointments on commissions. They are
Acting
putting
above the law.
appointments in the boards of state-owned entities.
Yeah.
Look at today. Look at the state media. The effort by the state media to detract attention from this centrally serious, potentially catastrophic
Government
situation.
officials, proven corruption.
And talking all kinds of foolishness
Yeah.
to detract attention from it. I'm sorry, are talking systems, and I know you don't like to go to systems.
No, I don't.
Because this is so important. There should not be state-owned media. We need to, as a question of law, prohibit any state ownership or control of radio, TV, media, anywhere.
Because they're trying to blow something this severe over, as if government officials have not been sanctioned by an international state.
And therefore, the police, the police are controlled. The media is controlled, the airwaves are controlled, the propaganda is there, and the only recourse we have is when America says y'all have gone to such an extreme that we are putting our foot down, and the response is a timid, ridiculous, virtual admission that we're a failed state.
Yeah.
So the last time when some folks in APNU lost their visas, they kowtowed and we had a fair election. This time some folks are threatened with visas and there's talk of sanctions, and the response from the government is our own permanent secretary sending on leave, and please give us the evidence so that we know what to do. Knowing full well that we do not have the machinery in this country, and in any event they control that machinery, so nothing can come of it locally.
Yeah, I come in at another angle with you here again. I told you I had some key points that I wanted to hit here. You know, we talk about how convenient it is to say we're a sovereign state, but then when in need, please come and help us. Okay, we like to throw that around like it's a football, we act out of convenience when it's for us, not when it's against us. Let me tell you something that's really worrying me, Tim. This is something that it's something that's on my mind. It's something that as soon as this situation came out, I kind of thought twice about it. Now, we have a government, we have a situation where the American government has looked at our entire situation when it came to these individuals and said, you guys have not acted on this. You guys basically, essentially are participating in this. They've kept everybody in the dark. They've done their investigations, and then they've acted on the evidence that they have. And they've sanctioned government officials and private citizens. Now, obviously, as you stated, what the wording that was used is the corruption that they have pegged on Mae Thomas is that she was involved in taking money and gifts on behalf of high-level government officials. That is the corruption.
I really hope it's not true.
But that is the corruption that the Americans are speaking on. That is the corruption that they have acted on. Now, let's get to an interesting conversation here. If that is the case, then both APNU and PPP, because again of how long these investigations have been ongoing. I mean, if you read the report, I think they said they opened the investigation on the Mohammeds since 2004. Okay? Now, we know our government has changed hands that many times. Now, here's what's interesting to me. When I sit down and look at a situation like this, all I see are people scared, cowering, and going to do anything to protect themselves. Because obviously we know that Mae Thomas was not acting on her own accord. Okay? We know that because there's no authority or decision-making authority that she has. So now we are sitting here, we know what was said, we know what is going on, and we have watched, again, two government officials and a private citizen get sanctioned here. And here's what worries me. If everybody knows that there are more people involved, then this hints to me that at some point in time, somebody has had to have said, well, I have to cover my ass, so I'm going to let that person go down. And scapegoats have been used. That's all that this can prove. And what worries me about these situations is that when the Americans have that type of control over high-ranking government officials that run this country, it worries me as to what else they can do to leverage that type of authority over them. What else can they get our government to do based on the fact that they now have evidence of them being corrupt and they have the motive to act on it, as they have already? And what will they now be asking any of our government officials to do based on the evidence that they have of their corrupt acts? And what worries me about this type of situation is we live in a country where our our government can make any decisions they want. They have no sort of accountability. They have no consultation process that needs to be met. What decisions or laws that they're going to be passing and making that will affect everybody just to save their own ass? That worries me, because these guys now are scared for themselves as the government of America is sanctioning government officials. When will it stop?
Well, Kian, I'm sorry. I hear what you're saying, but again, I hate to say it, but I take more comfort in the checks and balances which are inherent in the American system, an institution that I see works, rather than the complete catastrophic failure of the institutions that I see here perpetrated by our respective governments.
Agreed. I see the line you're walking.
I hate to see that. I hate to say it.
That another nation has more control and has more accountability and is keeping things more in check here than our own government is.
But although there is no doubt that Americans will look after Americans first, that their self-interest is what is paramount, and that the rest of the world can go to hell in a basket, except insofar as we are there to help them and help their standard of living and help all those things that they hold dear.
Yeah.
I understand that, but I believe that we are in such a bad state in Guyana that we need that one check and balance that is left. In our winner-take-all situation, where there is absolute control to the government, where you talk about the businessmen and say the businessmen should be alarmed, each of those businessmen stay quiet.
Yep.
Because they want that piece of land, they want that duty-free concession, they want that mining claim, they want that quarry license. Each of them is afraid to speak out, and each of them toes the line because those little crumbs, everything I just mentioned are crumbs.
Crumbs. Agreed.
Sustain them, and they know that if they speak out, the powers that be can say to them, you'll never get another contract. So we see in roads built, bridges built, roads broken up, bridges washed away, new roads built, new bridges built. We're seeing all of that, all done poorly in a situation that is not transparent, under questionable circumstances, not subject to scrutiny, and we are aware that the system is breaking down. And now, for the first time, I hope Guyanese are seeing on a day-to-day, ordinary basis what we are talking about when we say family and friends. What we're talking about when we say the importance of these bonuses that are given out to the few. And here's the thing. I also think it is important to understand how serious it is to be blacklisted.
Yes, that's the key. Because
you're taking something from the government and you're cozying up and you're friendly with the minister and you're cozying up and you're friendly with the powers. And that's all.
And you're paying the kickbacks.
And you're not paying your duty on your exports, and you're not paying your customs on your
avoiding
imports,
taxes.
And you're not, you're getting duty-free concessions and all of these nice things. Great. You're making plenty of money. Fine. When a sanction hits, your bank accounts are in trouble because the US companies cannot do business with any company that does business with you. So your bank accounts will all be closed. Now you think what happens if your bank accounts are closed. Your insurance is going to be terminated because the insurers, all you businesses that got large quarry operations and large operations that are reinsured, you insure it, GTM or Nalico or one of the local companies, those companies reinsure
are
with
backed by
larger foreign insurance companies.
Correct.
They're gone. Suddenly you can't have insurance anymore. So your bank account goes, you're now dealing cash, you can't have any insurance, your cambios go. So if you have a cambio license, that's gone. Your contracts, your foreign bank accounts that you like to have because you need access to buy things abroad, that's gone.
You can't travel.
If you understand how serious it is in terms of putting you back into the 19th century.
It's almost impossible.
If this begins to spread, and if the corruption is not stopped, and if we do not have transparent and proper systems in terms of the award of contracts, in terms of the appointment of people to office, in terms of handing out those licenses for petroleum and this and that and the other, if we don't have better transparent systems, everything is at risk. And the only checks and balances available in our precarious situation is the Americans. That is where we are.
Let me say this again as clear as I can, okay? And I think it has to be hammered home. The Americans, the information that the Americans gave us about May Thomas and about the Mohammeds is that the Mohammeds have evaded taxes here in Guyana, and May Thomas was involved in corrupt acts in Guyana. Now let me spell that out for you. They said, the Americans said, that they have sanctioned these people based on the laws that they've broken in Guyana. Okay, they have not said that any laws were broken anywhere else. I guess we can read between the lines, but at this point in time, that is the justification that they've used and are allowed to use. So now, as Tim just mentioned, you're getting contracts through corrupt means. You're not paying your right taxes. You've been cozy and friendly with people that America has deemed unfit, deemed to be somebody against them. Now, you out there that are thinking that you're all safe and protected because it's Guyana you in, and that's where you're doing business. Well, guess what? The Americans have now shown, I don't care what you think you're doing. I don't care how much you think you're protected. If you are breaking the laws even in your own country, we will punish you because your government is doing nothing. That is the message that the Americans just sent. And that is what you need to be worried about. You think it's about friends and, oh, I got friends in high places and I got a partner that I could call when I'm in trouble to get out. Well, guess what? Who is the partner that May Thomas or the Mohammeds could call now to get them out of being sanctioned by America? Because if you think there's a whole bunch of money about to be made, even the businesses that want to do business with them now, because of how they're blacklisted, are now shut out completely. So all of you out there that getting your contracts and doing your business and think you're making money, my question to you is, how long do you think that's going to last before America decides you're no longer somebody we want to do business with and shut you out?
It's a risk, isn't it?
It's a risk. Yeah, we've been preaching this. We have been preaching this over and over, that if the systems are not set up properly, if there is no accountability and no transparency, there will be a reaction. The Americans have been saying it.
But here's a problem, and you see, this is where corruption begins to feed itself and grows because it feeds on itself. If I got a preferential deal that I can get foreign exchange because I'm exporting something, whether, whatever it is, and because I'm exporting and getting a preferential deal, I now have access to foreign exchange. Other people competing with me selling shoes on Regent Street that have to go to the cambio to buy foreign exchange to get their raw material to bring it in, they are operating at a disadvantage because I got my own cambio and I got my own source of foreign exchange through selling gold or through selling whatever. And because of that, they then have to find a way to cut corners so that they can compete with me. Mm-hmm. And that's where the rot starts, because what happens then is that you cannot run a business honestly if you're not getting a piece of land to start up from central housing or from lands and surveys, if you're not getting a duty-free concession to run your vehicles, if you're not getting a quarry license or some other kind of license to start up. So if you're not getting those perks by cozying up to a minister or cozying up to the government, then you are operating at a disadvantage to the people who are doing those things.
Yeah.
You cannot run a business honestly.
Yep.
And that is why the corruption feeds on itself. You therefore have to be corrupt or else you sink. Yeah. And as soon as you bite, as soon as you go that route, it gets bigger, it swells, it grows. Because let me tell you something, and this is the truth. A man who earns $100,000 a month, his budget is 100. But as soon as that customs officer, police officer, whoever, becomes embroiled in corruption and takes a bribe so that his income is now $200,000 a month, his expenses rise to meet that. He suddenly has higher expectations. His wife, his girlfriend, his children, the money has to come in. He got to come back next month to make that $200,000 a month. It feeds itself.
Yeah.
It doesn't go down, it increases. And we have seen in Guyana corruption increasing and feeding itself. So that the people who have to pay to get their goods through customs, the people who have to pay to get these enormous buildings approved by Mayor and City Hall that should not be approved because there's no parking and because there's no infrastructure to support it, it feeds on itself. So that what happens is that a customs officer is not even going to pass your goods.
Yeah.
Because they got 3 other people lining up he knows will pay. And therefore you're at the bottom of the line and you cannot compare.
All the way down.
It feeds on itself, and we are seeing that. So it's one thing to quarrel with the business community and say, man, y'all are not doing anything, y'all are staying quiet. But I want you to understand that I recognize the difficulty. If you speak out, then you risk being a victim. You stick your neck out and you will suffer financially for it. The powers that be will say no more contracts for you. That is a risk. But I think it is a greater risk to recognize the corruption, to recognize the problem, to see it feeding on itself and growing.
Yeah.
And now seeing where the cliff is.
Yeah.
Because
you've reached the cliff.
Dancing close to that cliff, you're
Yeah.
dancing close, but we've just defined that cliff.
Yes. The Americans have defined it for us.
We are almost a failed state, unable to do our own investigation, unable to enforce our own laws, unable to prosecute because the government of the day, whichever side it is, controls the police, controls the prosecution, controls the entire process, and is happy for the process to be flawed because it allows them to do what they want to do. We do not have any Hunter Bidens and Donald Trumps in Guyana because if you are important, you are immune.
Yep.
The system is broken.
Tim, that's the nail on the head. And I don't know how else it can be explained to these people. I don't know how else. You know, I laugh. I sit down here and I read the comments. You're watching all the PPP people come out right now to try and make up excuses. And they jump to all kinds of things to try and
I forgot to mention that.
push.
And by the way, let me interrupt you. I'm sorry. Last week I had promised that we would have a discussion about good systems to get the money from gas and oil down to the people who need it most in a way that's transparent. I promised to do that today. Hopefully we could do that next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I needed to tell you,
no, definitely.
I apologize for that. This came up and this was more important.
Yeah.
You have your trolls who come out to watch you every week and to say to everybody else, they don't have time to watch this foolishness. Every week they come out to say the same thing. What can I tell you? You're doing well.
Tim, we are but failing as a nation, and everybody has to get concerned about this. As you said it so perfectly. We are dancing on the cliff. We are dancing on the cliff. And now we've seen a few people fall off of the cliff. And if you don't take this as a sign, if you don't take this as what it is, do you not see that everyone will then fall? Do we not realize that we've now been put in the position that the international community, because believe it or not, these diplomats, they talk, okay? The EU people, the Canadians, the British, the Americans, everyone.
They know perfectly well. If you just sit down and hear them and have a talk, and if they let the barriers fall, they know perfectly well what is happening.
That's
they
right.
know who is who.
That's right. They know the system, how it's working. They know the flaws. They know where we're heading. And they've watched this action be taken and not a word. Okay? Let me tell you why this is such a worrying situation as far as the international community is concerned that we should be worried about. Have you noticed that, again, like I said, the American government has become judge, jury, and executioner. They have decided they've found their own evidence. They have deliberated on it. They've found them guilty, and they've punished private citizens here in Guyana and government officials. Anywhere else in the world, this would be a diplomatic issue. This would be an issue that government sits down and says, hold on a second, you have not given our people a fair trial. You've just decided to sanction them and they can't do business here or anywhere else for that matter anymore. But we haven't heard their side. This government hasn't even seen the evidence. Okay?
But they've sent one on leave.
but they've sent their government official on leave. Now, how are we not worried at this point in time that nobody in the international community has said a word about this? Nobody has said, wait a second, there are protocols and procedures. You want to know why? Because they all agree. As Tim just stated, they all know what's happening. We all know what's happening. You could sit down there and you could talk your crappy comments trying to defend the PPP, but you've seen what the international community has responded with. They see the corruption, they know what's happening, and they're acting on it because they know the governments here do nothing and have never done anything.
And to the people who, as a last resort, will say, but at least the other side doing the same thing. You're right. The other side doing the same thing. But then what is your solution? To stay with this? To stay with this failed state? With the people that look like you? Or do we try something different?
Yeah.
We have to try something different. This cannot be sustained.
This cannot be sustained. And we've launched ourselves onto the international stage. I've loved this government getting out there and becoming president of the United Nations Security Council and standing up. And I just watched a clip with the president stating that we need to do more business with Africa because, by the way, he said this yesterday, amidst all of this. We need to do more business with Africa because, what was his name? Burnaby could come and sell out shows here. And I'm sitting there watching this stating, 2 of your government officials have just been sanctioned for corruption. That the government of America has said they have proof that they are corrupt. And you talking about doing business with other international communities? Who do you think is coming here now? Let's talk about that for 2 seconds. Which legitimate company is coming to Guyana to do business with a company with a government that the Americans have just said they have proof is corrupt? You think any American company, any big international company with reputation is coming here now, risking sanctions? You think that's where this country is headed? Talk all the positive bullshit you want. What is happening right now in this country? There's nothing positive about it. This is the international community and legitimate organizations blacklisting Guyana. That is what is happening. How about the government and the president and everybody talk about that? Let's talk about how the international community is now viewing Guyana after 2 of our government officials have just been sanctioned for corruption. Go ahead. Ask him to speak about that. How is all of these stages that they're standing on and preaching, good, come to Guyana and do business? Who coming now? Who is going? You're a legitimate businessman. You're coming to, you just see all the corruption that government just gets sanctioned. You're going to come here and do business? I don't think so. Okay? You can take your money and go elsewhere. But you know who will come here? The same type of people that are doing the corrupt business.
I think we got to reflect on what the personal repercussions will be, the business repercussions will be on someone who is blacklisted. Because if you lose access to the banks, if you lose access to insurance, if you lose access to travel, if all of your contractual partners, everybody you're buying from in the States, if you're selling shoes, the people you buy shoes from, any raw material that you need to buy, if they can no longer do business with you, and not just you, your wife, your children, your siblings, and the wife, children,
your
and
business
siblings
partners
cannot have bank accounts and cannot be transacting business with you, suddenly you're a pariah. So the people who were buying and selling with you before, the people who were buying your gold or selling you fuel, they can no longer buy your gold or sell you fuel. You're in serious trouble. And I don't know how you come out of it. Your first instinct might be for me to say, man, Kian, we're friends, I'm going to do it under your name and try and buy and sell gold under your name. But you'd be a fool to accept that, because the day you're caught, you're also blacklisted, because that's how it works.
Yeah.
If you are rendering aid, then you are equally blacklisted.
There you go. You're an accomplice.
You have no friends.
You're participating.
You have no friends. You are truly outlawed in the old feudal expression of the word.
Yeah.
And I think that is something we have to focus on and be worried about. That is something that is really important. And if we find our government individuals subject to that, we've already seen people from APNU with visas removed, taken away. We've seen members of this government sanctioned. If we are seeing more of that, we have to start asking ourselves what direction we're heading in and what the solutions are.
And the power is in the people's hands. At the end of the day, you're sitting there, you're a legitimate businessman, you want better for this country, you want to do better as an individual, then the country has to do better. And at this point in time, I'm sorry, we are all staring down the barrel of a failed state, and the only way we can fix this is to fix our voting. We have to ensure that there's accountability in our government. We have to make sure whoever is in power answers for what they are doing, that they have to be transparent, that they cannot make decisions on their own, because we are watching now what corrupt leaders lead this country to. Well, we are watching what's happening.
There's a larger issue as well, because smuggling or not paying duty or not, whether that's true or not, we don't know, and we may never know. But the fact is that if these folk can no longer do business, the foreign exchange that they pass through the system, because they sell gold abroad, they pass it through the banks, they pass it through the cambios locally. If that is no longer available, I'm waiting to see what happens with our banking system and our foreign exchange issues.
Yeah.
And the same folk who are staying under the radar, hoping not to draw attention to themselves, hoping to continue to get their crumbs and live as good as they can, they are going to immediately suffer if there are foreign exchange shortages, if the banking system is rocked. If something like this happens again with somebody else, I mean, this one, only time will tell how severe this particular one is. But the entire economy is potentially at risk, and you will not help yourself by trying to stay under the radar. At some point, Guyanese have to own up and understand democracy is not a spectator sport, and they have to do the right thing of their own accord rather than hiding.
And if you want proof of everything you just said and why people need to be worried, look at your neighbor, Venezuela. Now, I would like to make an important message to everyone out there that needs to remember this. Our oil money is in a New York bank account. So when the Americans decide that this government is corrupt and they are sanctioning them, guess what they do first?
Well, it happened when Russia invaded Ukraine. It happened when Iraq couldn't prove they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. We are not a village. We're not insular. We're not isolated. We are totally dependent. Yep. And again, I hate to say it, maybe it's not such a bad thing, because there has to be some checks and balance. There has to be some accountability. And if there is none in Guyana, maybe we'll get some embarrassment by international exposure. Yep. At some point, we got to be forced to fix our systems and do the right thing.
Agreed. Tim, on that note, we are out of time. Sorry we started late. We're going to end...
next week, we can talk about systems. If some other emergency doesn't come up,
if more sanctions are not laid. But more importantly, please, the next show, we're going to be talking a lot more about solution-based. I think we just talked a lot here about doom and gloom, worrisome stuff. But there are ways at the end of the day, politically, to solve these problems. And there are ways that we can still ensure that this country continues on its trajectory now that we have the opportunity to do better. And it's in the hands of the people of this country.
And we acknowledge Barbara Barbs and our Sing Sing and your other trolls who are there every single day.
I appreciate you guys. You guys keep the views up. And it's the algorithm, the comments. What they don't realize is the more they comment is the more it gets shared to other people on the algorithm. So you guys keep talking. Nonetheless, guys, for all of you out there that are listening and want better for Guyana, at some point, we have to take responsibility and start speaking up. As I keep saying, this is in the hands of all of us here, all of us Guyanese. And we can call and point fingers on the government and at officials and at people that we believe are doing wrong. But at the end of the day, the accountability falls on the people. This is a democracy. You vote for who leads this country. And at the end of the day, if you are worried and you want better for the country, then you have to change your vote. You have to ensure that we don't continue down the same path that we have been over the last 57, 58 years now. We have to do better. This is why this country is not moving anywhere as far as progress is concerned, other than a few new roads that everybody's claiming is great. Clearly, we have bigger issues at hand here that need to be addressed.
You know what's hilarious, though, and I gotta say it, what makes me laugh is that the Abdul loyalists say this would never have happened under Burnham. The man who destroyed our economy completely.
I think if there's one thing we can all agree with is that we have this argument of the lesser of two evils, and that's how most of you try to convince yourself we voted for either APNU or PPP because they're less evil. Well, I'd like to. I actually made the comment to Tim just before we came on air. What is currently going on, and what is currently happening with this country, with corruption and how the international community and sanctions, and how bad it's becoming a situation where business can almost not be done here because the international community will stop doing business with Guyanese soon because of the corruption, is the same exact repercussions we would have had if we allowed APNU to rig the election and get away with it. We are now looking at two parties that would have had an equal reaction to destroying this country. And if you guys have not learned by now that APNU and PPP are identical, there is no lesser of the two evils. They are equally as evil. I don't know what to tell you, but we are dancing on the ledge, and we've watched some people fall off. We've watched government officials get sanctioned, and now we all need to take responsibility for what happens next. On that note, guys, Tim, thank you again for coming. We'll be back next week. Guys, this is Apolitically Incorrect. Last and not least, please be careful on the roads. Please be careful on the roads. I would much rather you be alive in a corrupt country than not alive because you have, been in a fatal accident and your family mourns you and is left, behind. You guys have to start thinking about that on these roads and be careful. All right, be cautious out there. Have a long weekend. It's Eid, so
yes, happy Eid.
Happy Eid. All right, and to everyone out there, please enjoy and be safe. My name is KIAN Jabour. This is Apolitically Incorrect. See you guys next week. Take care.